Okay. So next start. I'm a bit stressed, which is totally unnecessarily because we are not so many, and I think it's a welcoming atmosphere. So thanks that I can speak here to that topic. But actually, the context is not so much the one I am into. I gave, for example, the last 3 evenings talks in kind of anti-authoritarian anarchist scenes. So this is more, yeah, my context now. But I also am made a PhD. I brought my book with me to show it to you, not to advertise it, but I'm a kind of proud to survive the process of doing the PhD. And as you see, it's the politische Theorie des Anarchismus. I was not able to raise the money to translate it to English up to now, but you can download it for free. It's open access. So yeah, that's also the basis for the thing I will talk about, the paradoxical concept of politics in anarchist thought as basis for understanding direct action and direct democracy. And in this panel, as we start the conference now, it's more kind of, meta debate or something like this, more a way to, building concepts firstly, before we go more deeper in case studies or whatever. So, okay. So to my mind, anarchism is also a way of thinking. I mean, I'm in the field of political theory, not so much in history, but political theory. But above this political theory, there is kind of political philosophy to my mind. And so anarchism is also a way to think about things and to question things. And this picture I found in Amsterdam, actually, in a house. I didn't enter it, unfortunately, because it was just a common house in the inner city. But as a symbolic picture, it says to me something about anarchism, because anarchism is a way to make people curious or even seduce persons to question their beliefs or the way of their thinking. So and that's what the picture represents, and what I want to present here. So I'm working a lot of, or in my thought, I'm working with paradoxes as a basic. The thinking in paradoxes came at one side from post-structuralist thought, and it is close by dialectical thinking, I would say, but it also is to be distinguished from dialectics. So paradoxes, you may know, in a dictionary, it is derived from the Greek para, against, doxa, opinion. It goes against the usual opinion, the unexpected, unbelievable, strange, in addition to the paradoxon, the paradox, which is opposed to what is believed, what is meant, the seemingly contradictory, a finding that questions the usual views in a surprising way. These may be true or false findings. And I think also, if we are here in a scientific context, it makes sense to at least try to have this paradox perspective, because it enables us to see the things in different ways. But of course, we are living in kind of crazy times. And this way of thinking is to be distinguished, of course, from kind of post-truth thinking or post-truth argumentation, from conspiracy theory or mythological thought, which is also pushed very much forward. But on the other side, it is often irritating, unfamiliar, heretical, and a skeptical way of thinking. So this political philosophy is the thing or the way I want to think also and go on when I'm thinking about paradoxes in anarchism. And it is not just a post-structuralist perspective that our approach that I brought you out. I would really argue that there are paradoxes in the core of anarchist thinking. And some of them you may know. It is, for example, the paradoxical relationship between order and chaos. Because order in anarchism should be a voluntary order. So order could be understood as the order of society, as a libertarian socialism, but anarchism as a principle to question all kinds of order for principle. So there are other terms which are more popular in researches on, for example, social movements and theory of social movements like real utopia, or the term of spaces in between, or prefigurative politics. So I would argue these concepts have a paradoxical character. Also very early from anarchism, social freedom, because it is a strange mixture of liberal and socialist thought, which brings up something new, but something new that is not just a third thing, something that is still in tension. Also the term of voluntary agreement or autonomy of organizations in federation. And also what is especially then the book about, the term of anti-politics. So that means the relationship to politics in anarchism, that I would argue is kind of paradoxical one. Because at the one side, anarchists have a profound, deep critic on politics, not just if it comes to state, but also politics of social movements, politics as a way of organizing things, politics of a kind of logic and so on. But on the other side, they have to do politics, or just in the empirical practice, they're participating in kind of politics, even in not, if not in statist politics. And so it comes to direct action. And maybe we also can argue that direct democracy is a paradoxical concept from this perspective, but I'm not very sure. For that, I put question marks around it. We can debate it. So anarchism questions politics in a regular way because, of course, they are related to state. But I would say even above, anarchism is also an ethical way of living. So that means, okay, what are our values? What could be the values or the ways of living in a kind of other society that is desired? So the ethics are very important in anarchism, and there are, sometimes or often in conflicts with the politics in a more classical sense. Anarchism as a way to organize social movements from specific principles on, and also the way to understand social movements is another thing than just the common politics like in status institutions as we know now. For that reason, of course, anarchists don't organize themselves in political parties because they have a critic on this kind of politics. And even if it comes to political theory, anarchism is the only one which questions domination at all and says that it is possible to live in a society totally without domination. And this is not just possible, but also desirable. So also here, there seems to be a conflict with politics. So this is a very schematic scheme. So, I mean, in the reality, the things are very much mixtured, but in political theory, the things are very easy, as you see. If we understand anarchism and as one as the main currents in socialism, which is the red triangle, then we can distinguish it, very schematic, of course, from party communism and from social democracy, but they also share, of course, different aspects, and they share same values, like equality, social freedom, and so on. But the argument here is that what I called party communism and social democracy still relates on logics of politics, on forms that are more the common forms of political organizations, like, of course, the parties, but also in a way of how the transformation of society is perceived, that these are political categories, and anarchism is a way of organizing that goes beyond at least these categories in a way of self-organization from below. And this is another approach, and all these things I told you now makes it so difficult to understand what anarchism actually is. Where does this profound critic of politics comes from? Also in my book, I try to explain or investigate that there are 4 main reasons: historical experiences, that means the politicization of the socialist movements, where anarchists goes beyond that, the engulfment or recuperation of politics by the modern state. This is more kind of like the state is absorbing the political, but also persons in the social movement are addressing the institutionalized status political. So this is a process from both sides. Also the modern society, how the societal spheres are differentiated and specialized, and the resistance to that, as is formulated or brought out in anarchism, and the so-called political apathy or disenchantment with politics, which leads persons, of course, not to an anarchist position, but anarchist thought justifies this in a way because people are not or feel themselves not as represented or seen or perceived in the political system. So the main lines of arguments are that politics are hierarchical, that they're representative, specialized, alienating, illusionary, or even a trap, like Emma Goldman put it in a text, or boring. So different lines of politics. And when I investigated that in a field of political theory, I relate to a concept of Saul Newman in his book, The Politics of Post-Anarchism, where he argues that if we talk about politics, then kind of automatically the other of politics arises, anti-politics as a working term, of course. I would criticize Newman's theory for several aspects, but I would say in this respect, he is kind of right, because there seems to be this contradiction or this paradoxical understanding of politics in anarchism. And I think at this point, he's right, even, or especially when it comes to utopia or ethics, that they are in attention to politics. I added the spheres of strategy and program here because this my development, because I would argue it has reasons why explicit anarchist scenes are seldom bring out like clear programs or clear strategy, which seems to be a failure maybe if you view it from a side of leftist political movements, but has really sense in a way anarchist things. So and out of this, Newman argues that there is a kind of a politics of autonomy arising, which is kind of still in process to formulate. And he frames it like this would happen like automatically or from kind of philosophically reasons or whatever. But I would go even beyond, because I would argue that it makes sense, but we should and we can name what is the content, what is the strategy, what is the what is the approach of these anarchist politics of autonomy, and how does it in fact or in reality arises from this contradiction from an anarchist strategy. So, and that leads also to the development that there is a common denominator or common ground for different strings of anarchism. Sometimes they are said, okay, well, what is the common denominator of anarchist currents? Because they are so different, and that seems to be contradictory or very strange. And then they said that this, the critic or the abolishing of the state is the common denominator. And I would say that that makes no sense, because just to say, okay, I'm against the state or whatever does not lead to a profound position. I would say at the basis of this different anarchist currents is the striving for autonomy. That means to give yourself own rules, but in opposition to statist laws. So there is this basic assumption behind that it is possible to strive for autonomy even in a society that is very much formed by several kinds of domination. And therefrom different tendencies of anarchists arises or arise. They have different forms of organization and they have different strategies. So this is a differentiation or a distinguishment not out of the kind of core ideas, but out of the strategies and the forms of organizations of different currents of anarchism, which have the common ground in a striving for autonomy. So what does it mean then when it comes to direct action? I would argue that direct action is also kind of paradoxical mode, exactly because of this specific understanding of politics in anarchism. So it is a paradox between political action at the one side and ethical action and utopian aspiration at the other side. Also, for example, David Graeber argues in that way. So direct action in that perspective differs from civil disobedience, but also as kind of just as a way of, ethical way of life or just utopian projections. It seems to be something in between, which is not easily to define. So, and out of this way to think direct action as something in between political action and ethics or utopia, there are some key features which you probably also know, but which make very much sense if we think direct action as a paradoxical mode or concept. So direct action has at least the attempt to be emancipatory. That means it empowers the oppressed and the exploited. They empower themselves. Direct action is radical in the sense that it points directly to aspects of domination. It is prefigurative because it creates directly new worlds in the shell of the old. And it is confrontative because it defines and relays on antagonisms which are to be defined. And the last point, it is initiative, or it takes initiative. That means it enables the weak and poor and powerless as actors or social movements, not as just extra parliamentary movements, but as a factor which is going forward and determines their own strategy beside the kind of normal or way that politics goes. How does it is, or how do we come from there to direct democracy? I mean, direct democracy is also very much wide term where we could put in different assumptions or idea what it is. But from that perspective, it is essentially self-organization as an organizational form of libertarian socialist society. That's what I would argue. So it has the attempt to be another mode of organizing society and another kind of society that I call libertarian socialist society. And so it is a paradoxical mode between kind of pure anarchy and political state. Because often we are thinking in terms like, okay, is organized society really thinkable without state? And I would say, yes, of course, it is, even if it's difficult to imagine from the point we are now. It is, of course, thinkable that communities organize themselves in an autonomous, self-organized way. But pure anarchy as a principle which questions all organizations and all fixed institutions also leads to kind of erosion of every order. So that means that direct democracy seems to be something in between, and between status domination government, which is inherently hierarchical relation. And so these are also main principles, like I put them before, which I would say that these are main principles of organizing in anarchism, which are explainable from that background of the paradoxical understanding of politics, which leads to other organizational principles, as, for example, other leftist social movements. So the main principles are autonomy, that means setting the own regulations. Decentral, that means it's a widespread network of different forms, network that is federative, or also in the phrase of a network, like a mycelium. It is voluntary, that means people have to take their own decision to act mutually together without coercion. And this organization is horizontal. That means getting together on an eye level. So, I mean, I don't develop these main principles, but I wanted to emphasize or to show you that they can be very much better to be understood before the background of a paradoxical understanding of politics. Okay, it was a bit blurry. I hope you get my main points. And yeah, here I have a personal blog where I also write some kind of not so much academic, but also theory. If you're interested, you can have a look there. And yeah, thanks again for being here.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's enough if we introduce ourselves.
It cannot do any harm to repeat the name. If you're like me, I'm not very good with names. So.
Hi, Jonathan. That was wonderful. And I wondered whether there is one more paradox that might fit here. And that is the tyranny of structurelessness. A very famous paper by Joe Freeman from the flight in 77 or so, where she argues that in these unstructured horizontal groups, some people might be very dominant. And I was wondering whether you had thought about this paradox.
I mean, not when I prepared this presentation, but yeah, of course. I mean, I'm not sure if it's really a paradox, but I have to think a bit more about it. But the thing is, I mean, of course, if you say, okay, we don't have hierarchies or everybody's equal, and you just like proclaim and that's it, and you don't build other structures or forms of organization, then it don't catches the informal hierarchies and also not the domination in society at all that enables some people or silence other peoples and so on. And I think this is the point. So you need kind of other ways of organization. But I mean, going with these principles, I would say this is, if you take them serious, this is a way to really to build other concepts. And yeah, I mean, I'm of course very much for organization, but in the last years, I also yeah, value much more also chaos. But maybe from a just philosophical perspective, or maybe because the society is anyway in hard shifts or whatever. And yeah, I'm not totally against chaos, but this is a maybe personal thing.
Okay, well, I'm Goran. The Melbourne of originally Serbia. So I'm studying student movements in Serbia since the 90s in their struggle against the state. And there is this concept of student movement being apolitical, and that's pretty much the only frame the society accepts when students come to the state. And so in the recent blockade, that are still happening in Serbia for over 6 months, all universities are blocked. Students went from anarchism, direct actions, plenary sessions at the universities, and something they call, I don't even know how, micro gatherings in cities and villages, to the point that they're now asking for elections, and they're even compiling a list of candidates. What was very interesting for me, and maybe it's more a connection there than the question, is that one part of the university that was very anarchist started with sort of the democracy. And that kind of idea permeated even to the right-wing groups, the student groups, as something that was possible. However, it kind of collapsed fairly quickly. It's just a thought is more than a question about this anti-political as the kind of acceptable way for a group such student movement to penetrate the political arena. And that idealism and utopian sort of formative goal.
I mean, really interesting because it's a very actual movement also. And I mean, I would like to hear more about it maybe later on. I mean, the point you touched is, yeah, so this being kind of against politics or whatever is sometimes proclaimed by punks or anarchists or whatever. I mean, I even have a picture here. Somebody sent it to me because it fits to that. Yeah, okay, politics is shit. Anarchy is good. Okay, as a political theoretician, I would say that's very much too short. And that's also not the essence of anarchist thinking. But I mean, it says that there seems to be, yeah, a profound critic, a deep critic on politics, how they actually work or people perceive them. So. And that leads to the question, okay, do we then came to an apolitical position? And I would argue no, because you cannot do you can't do politics even from an anarchist perspective. If you want to change society, that means that you have to deal with the power relations or whatever, or the things going on, and that means that the position I would pledge for is an anti-political, but with like Klammern, yeah. So, but to come to this position, firstly, a profound critic of the politics, how they work, is to be formulated. And this maybe there's a bit of relation to the things you said. There's one author, Konrad György, a Hungarian author, who also wrote about anti-politics as a way to oppose the bureaucratic real socialist states in Hungary. He wrote it, I think, 1985. So he also claims the term anti-political for his position. That means an intellectual distance from the politics, how they work in a real socialist bureaucratic state and so on. This is not directly anarchist, but it has some ties to the position I will formulate here. Maybe that at this point. Yeah.
Even political parties often to be apolitical or oppositional parties. They live in parliament, they burn in the parliament.
Well, thank you very much then.
Interesting.